This game sucks. Don't believe me? Just look at it. NES Play Action Football is one of the worst football games I've ever played. And that's really saying something. No, it's not worse than LJN's NFL game. That one's really bad. Probably the worst game of all time. It would be kind of hard to make a game worse than that. But this game is just as sluggish, it's just as frustrating, and it's just as much fun. And the worst part is that it was published under the Nintendo name. Now, the biggest problem with this game is this isometric perspective. I guess you could also call it a diagonal perspective. Pushing up makes you go up from your player's perspective, but not from what you see. And this is really confusing even when you get used to it. And that's really only the start of the problems. If the offense decides to pass, you go into this wide-angle view until the ball is thrown. It kind of makes sense because you can see more of the field, but it's really distracting and it goes by really slowly. And you know, I've really got to wonder what in the world the programmers were thinking. This idea that the camera perspective is going to shift from being zoomed way out to zoomed way in doesn't work in any of the games that tried to do this. It's just a bad idea, plain and simple. LJN's NFL and the NES did exactly the same thing, and the shifting camera perspective made the game totally unplayable. The problem is that you can't make any strategic adjustments even if you see them because your players move way too slowly. Joe Montana Football 92 had a similar approach. There it works a little bit better, but it still can be really distracting.
He throws. No good. Brings up second down and 10.
And of course, Joe Montana 93 did the same thing as well.
Pass out to the left. Intercepted at the 32. Hit and stop. Minnesota has it at the 32.
Now, I kind of understand what they were going for here. However, this is the era of sports games that were trying to show off the graphics. There are too many sports games from this era that try to show off the graphics with big sprites in order to try to make it look a little bit better. Now, the programmers then completely forgot about the reason why we play these games. We play them to play them, not to look at them. And so, if you look at the original Tecmo Bowl for the NES, you'll notice that there's only one field perspective. Notice as well that you still see enough of the field to play. In other words, you don't have to zoom way out to see 50 yards or more at the same time. Play Action Football is obsessed with zooming way out. And it's really annoying. But then you get to the play calling screen where things are somehow worse. Okay, here's the play calling screen. You've got 8 different plays to choose from, 4 running plays and 4 passing plays. Like Tecmo Super Bowl, you choose one or the other depending on whether you push A or B with the direction. And the diagrams show you that each play choice uses the same offensive formation. Anyway, it's kind of creative, but if you want to use a play other than those 8 plays, it becomes a little bit complicated. Well, I couldn't figure out what to do to change to a different page of the playbook, at least at first. You see, if you look at the manual, it tells you right here that you've got a total of 24 plays to choose from on 3 different pages. But that page doesn't tell you how to get to the next page of the playbook in the game. No, you've got to go to the middle of the next page of the manual. There you see that if you push the A and B button at the same time, you go to the next page. And it does work, sort of. Sometimes I had to try a couple of times to get that to register. And that's just strange. I mean, you couldn't push, like the select button. Now, I understand that they wanted the start button to be used for like a timeout or if you have to use a bathroom or whatever. I mean, all of that makes sense. But you never use the select button in this game. So why not use select? Anyway, the offensive plays are largely the same and they don't work all that well. Most running plays are actually direct snaps to the running back for some stupid reason. After a while, I had more success calling passing plays and then just running the ball up the middle. and the defensive plays are really bad. Almost everything is a blitz, and the play diagrams are not easy to read at all. But controlling this game on defense really is the worst part. I mean, the defense in this game is literally unplayable. It took me a while to figure out how to change the player that I controlled on defense. So you've got to push the A and B buttons together to switch to the player closest to the ball. However, even when you do that, the game tends to choose some player at random instead of making a choice that, makes sense. And it's almost impossible to catch up to the computer if you've got to run it down. Seriously, this game is just tedious. And then you get to the passing system on offense, which is just bad, bad, bad. If you look at the manual, it's not entirely clear how you're supposed to choose a receiver. So you push one of the control pad directions when you push B to select your receiver. Of course, the game doesn't show you who is who, making it impossible to figure out what you're supposed to be doing. In fact, you're zoomed out so far that you can't realistically see any of it. Anyway, in theory, you throw the ball to where the receiver is going to be, and then you get control of the receiver. You're supposed to run to the right spot and then catch the ball. I think this illustration in the manual means you can jump if you push B, though honestly I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, it really doesn't work all that well in practice. Long story short, this game is horrible. Every single element of this game is bad. It's all poorly done. There are no redeeming qualities to this game whatsoever. And the worst part of all is that there are sequels. Nintendo came out with a Super Nintendo version in 1992, and this one is even worse than the NES version. Sure, you have more plays to choose from, but just look at this horrible play selection screen. You can technically look closer at the plays, but nothing's well described at all. And this game itself is stuck on this extremely zoomed in view mode. Now, in my opinion, it's kind of hard to design a 16-bit game that is worse than the 8-bit game that it was based on, but Nintendo managed to pull that off here. The perspective is still that awful isometric view. I guess the cool thing is that you can change the size of this radar screen, which isn't any help anyway. The only nice part is that you can switch your players on defense by pushing L or R, no longer A and B together. But the really funny thing is that everything else on defense only uses the A and B buttons. And actually, offense is the same way. The X and Y buttons are never used in this game. It's almost like those other buttons don't even exist. So I honestly think that Super Play Action Football might be the worst football game on the Super Nintendo. But of course, I do have to be careful saying that because there are a whole ton of really bad games or questionable games that I haven't played yet. I mean, you never know what kind of monstrosity is going to rear its ugly head in the future. Anyway, there's a Game Boy version as well. This is the same as the NES version with one notable exception. The Game Boy version is in a vertical perspective, which makes it a lot easier. Also, you can push either A or B to change the play calling page. Overall, the Game Boy version is a lot smoother and it's actually faster than the NES version. So if you had to play one of those awful games, I would recommend the Game Boy version. Even then, though, you won't want to play for more than a few minutes. Now, the worst part about the Play Action Football series isn't even that the games are bad. No, the worst part is that the games were advertised as if they were really good. And so when I was a kid, I saw these ads and I really wanted to play these games. Volume 16 of Nintendo Power had this big spread on NES Play Action Football. Of course, if you actually read through it, you'll realize that there's not much substance here. But check out this part. You can play with 4 players if you want. And wouldn't it be cool to play on a TV that big? Now, most kids never played 4-player anything on the NES because the NES satellite was expensive and it wasn't available everywhere and it was kind of hard to find. In fact, I would be surprised if a lot of people even bothered to play this game 2-player because it's that bad. The Super NES version got 4 pages worth of coverage, which is a lot considering how small Nintendo Power still was. The pictures looked cool at the time, but in hindsight there wasn't much substance here. But at least the final ratings were poor, which is fair given how bad that game actually is. That was an improvement since Nintendo Power didn't even print numerical ratings when the first NES game was released. Now, as I've said before, there really wasn't a whole lot of truth in video game journalism in the late 80s and the early 90s. And back in those days, of course, you couldn't usually test out the games at the store before you bought them. I mean, sometimes you would go to, I would go to Shopko or something, and they'd have one of those units up that would let you play a game for 5 minutes, but that was usually a Mario game. They never had Play Action Football there. Anyway, I feel sorry for any kid whose parents got them this game. In my opinion, the Super NES version of this game is just simply unplayable. I mean, don't even touch it. The NES version is a little bit better, though it's still really bad. The Game Boy version is actually the best of the three. But even still, this is probably one of the worst football games on the console. And it really is a shame. So I'm not sure how the people at Tosei, the company that actually programmed this game, I'm not sure how they decided to make this game without taking at least a look at Tecmo Bowl. Now, what should have been at the very least a reasonably good game, maybe an average game, wound up being a total abomination in the end.